Hello. Today we're going to talk about writing equations of lines. The most common form that you are going to use is slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is what we know as y equals mx plus b. M stands for the slope, b stands for your y-intercept. Y-intercept, remember, was just where does your line cross the y-axis. Writing an equation can be as simple if you have the slope and the y-intercept. You know it has to be of this form, so we can say y will have to equal, and if they say a slope of 2/3, I'll say y equals 2/3 x, and if the y-intercept is 4, I'll write plus 4. And just by taking these 2 points and putting them into those 2 spots, you write an equation. Now the question is going to be, what happens when they don't give you this? Sometimes they're not going to necessarily tell you that your y-intercept equals 4, but they might tell you that it goes through a point. It might go through a point 0, 4. Well, take a look at 0, 4. 0, 4 is left and right 0, up 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's where that point is. That point is on the y-axis, so it is the y-intercept. And so if I wanted to graph this line, it goes through 0, 4 with a slope of rise 2, run 1, 2, 3. There's my next point. Rise 1, 2, run 1, 2, 3. There's my next point. And I can graph this by looking something like that. So what if they're not that nice? What if they say, here's a slope is 3, but it goes through a point that's not your y-intercept, say 2, 6. Well, they made a special form for that, and they call it point-slope form. Point-slope form is y minus y1 equals m, which is your slope, times parentheses x minus x1. So this is point-slope form, and what it's designed for is to say, okay, what's your slope? Put it in the m spot. What's your x1? x1 and y1 are the x point of your x value of your point, and the y1 is the y value of your point. So you just drop them in. So solving this equation can be as simple as saying y minus, y1 would be 6, equals m is going to be 3, parentheses x minus x1 is going to be 2. And so once you put this in this point-slope form, now you're 2 steps away from getting it into slope-intercept. First step is going to be distribute. So 3 times x is 3x. 3 times a minus 2 is a minus 6. We still have a y out here, minus and a 6. And then let's plus 6 to both sides. Plus 6 to both sides. We'll have y equals 3x, and minus 6 plus 6 equals a plus 0, which I don't have to write because it's 0, but you can just for clarification. Then there is your formula simplified into slope-intercept form. Now I'm going to tell you about one other method, because what if you forget this point-slope form? Well, you can use what we know of slope-intercept, y equals mx plus b. We can use that. How are we going to use that? Well, remember that x and y are parts of a point. So if I took and I said, obviously 3 is my slope, but take these points, 2 is my x, and put that in the x spot, and the 6 is my y, put that there, I'll get 6 equals 3 times 2 plus b. Once I have it here, I can solve for b. 3 times 6, 3 times 2 is 6. So 6 equals 6 plus b. That's minus 6, and we'll have 0 equals b. Once I know that, hey, b is 0, I can then go back up to this form, and I can say, so my y equals, slope was 3x, and then plus I know what b is. B is going to be 0. And again, because it's 0, I wouldn't necessarily have to write it. I could write it and simplify it as y equals 3x. But either way you like it, there's two different ways of getting the same exact equation. Well, what happens if they tell you write an equation of a line that goes through these 2 points? Now you don't have slope. Well, remember what the formula was for finding slope. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so what does that translate to be? Our y of our second point is a minus 4, minus our y of our first point was a 1, over our x of our second point was 8, minus x of our first point was 6. And now let's simplify. Minus 4 minus 1 is a minus 5, over 8 minus 6 is a 2. So now I can say, hey, this is my slope. I have my slope now. Once I have my slope, I can use either of those two methods to write an equation. If I want to use point slope, which was y minus y1 equals m times x1, x plus, x minus x1. There we go. Then what I'll do is I will put in my variables. So now I have 2 points to pick from. Which one do you want to use? I like using positives and I like using smaller numbers. It doesn't matter which point you use. I'm going to pick this 6, 1 because it'll solve to both the exact same equation. So I'm going to write in y minus my y1 was the 1 equals slope I said was minus 5 halves, parentheses x minus x from the first point was a 6. Okay, so I'm just putting in the 1 and the 6 in those spots, and I found my slope already. My slope was minus 5 halves, and now let's just solve it. 2 steps. So distribute minus 5 halves x. Now minus minus makes a plus. 6 divided by 2 is a 3. 3 times 5 is 15 equals y minus 1. Let's plus 1 to both sides, plus 1 to both sides, and I'll be left with a y equals minus 5 halves x equals plus 16. And there's my equation. Again, just to show you one more time, what if you forget that equation? You can use my y equals mx plus b slope-intercept form. Let's plug in the 6 in the x spot, the 1 in the y spot. The slope was minus 5 halves. And so we'll have 1 equals minus 5 halves times 6 plus b. Solve for b. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 times 5, we're going to have a minus 15 plus b equals 1. It's plus 15 plus 15 on both sides. We'll have a 16 equals b. Now that I know b, I can come back and say my equation has to be a y equals, has to be my slope, which I know that is minus 5 halves x, and then plus my b is going to be a plus 16. Either way, you get the exact same equation. Good luck. Happy writing equations.